But I do want to propose the concept of the anti-theist, as opposed to the non-theist or the agnostic. The anti-theist, such as myself, someone who's hostile to the idea of religion, takes no position as between different faiths. We maintain that the pluralism of faith, the extraordinary pluralism of faith and the schism within existing faiths, the number of churches all claiming to have, or if not churches, synagogues or mosques, or gurdwaras or temples, claiming to possess or open an avenue to the truth and competing with one another, is susceptible of a very simple explanation. The pluralism of religion is attributable to the fact that man created God, and not the other way around.
Good grief, so it hadn't completely sunk in on me that as you were being ordained, when I was 9, I was just getting out of there completely. It was 9 when I thought I saw through it, when my biology teacher told me that God was so good as to have made vegetation green because it was the color most restful to our eyes. And I thought, Mrs. Watts, this is nonsense. I knew nothing about chlorophyll or photosynthesis, nothing about the theory of evolution, nothing about adaptation, nothing of the sort. I just knew she'd got everything all wrong. And of course the argument against faith, against religion, falls into two essential halves, not necessarily congruent, but I believe congruent. The first is, it's not true. Religion comes from the infancy of our species. I won't say race because I don't think our species is subdivided by races. Infancy of our species, when we didn't know that the earth went round the sun. We didn't know that germs caused disease. We didn't know when we were told in Genesis, you're given dominion over all creatures, that this did not include microorganisms, because we didn't know they were there. So you didn't know they had dominion over us. When diseases broke out, it was blamed on wickedness, or sometimes on the Jews, or if it was by Jews, on the Amalekites, or as you will. We didn't know anything about the nature of the Earth's crust, how it was cooling, earthquakes, storms, all of this were a mystery. Well, we are at least to that extent a reasoning species. Even a conspiracy theory is often better than no theory at all. The mind searches for form. We're now stuck with the forms that we found in our infancy.
Once you assume a creator and a plan, it makes us objects in a cruel experiment whereby we are created sick and commanded to be well. I'll repeat that. Created sick and then ordered to be well. And over us to supervise this is installed a celestial dictatorship, a kind of divine North Korea. Greedy, exigent, I would say more than exigent, greedy for uncritical praise from dawn till dusk, and swift to punish the original sins with which it so tenderly gifted us in the very first place.
That I believe that the emancipation from religion is the fundamental emancipation that the human mind must undergo before it can consider any very serious questions. Forced by my daughter to watch Family Guy, because you may possibly have seen the moment when the chubby father comes down in the morning and looks at his cereal in the bowl, accepting one of your more sophisticated challenges, sir. And he says, look at this, it says woo, 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 woo. And his daughter says, those are Cheerios, Dad.
And as well as being man-made, it's fear-made. It is the unexpressed or partially expressed wish for a protector, a parent, someone who will never desert you, someone who will do in a way you're thinking for you, especially on questions of moral philosophy. At its best, it's that. It's a wish to be loved more than you probably deserve. And at its worst, it's the underdeveloped part of the human psyche that leads to totalitarianism, that wants to worship and that wants a boss, that wants a celestial dictatorship. And that's the bit that's now threatening to destroy our secular civilization. You want a sense of wonder and splendor. Spend a few minutes with a page or two of Stephen Hawking's Brief History of Time. Or have a look at what the Hubble telescope has been sending back to you. Or spend a little time looking at the extraordinary discoveries that are being made by the unraveling of the string of our own ribonucleic DNA. We now have, you are, particularly, ladies and gentlemen, younger among you, privileged again, yet again, as if you weren't privileged enough, for heaven's sake, to be the first generation to whom it's become possible to look really at and closely at and close up at what the origins of our universe and our cosmos and our human nature and species really is.
Recently, very recently, in fact, as little ago in time as last year, the Vatican announced that limbo, the destination of the unbaptized child soul, no longer exists. There is no such place. St. Augustine was in error, it appears, in sending so many children, at least the souls of so many unbaptized children, to this destination for so long. Among the comments that I heard about this, among the mildest, actually, was that of a woman raised in the Catholic faith, whose child had died before baptism could take place, who had for many years believed that that's where her unbaptized child had gone. And she said, they can't tell me that place doesn't exist. It's been as real to me as anything possibly could be for so long. They've no right to tell me now that this no longer exists. Ontologically, limbo exists for those who believe in it just as God does. I'm not here to deny that. It's only a few decades now since the rival church, Church of Rome, the Church of England, announced that really no one actually goes to hell. It could be that after you die you're forbidden God's grace, but there's no real place of eternal, unending, infinite torture and torment with which those who claimed the grace of God and the redemption of Jesus made a living for so many years. And how do they make their living? By lying to children. Think of it. Hundreds and hundreds of years of people proudly earning their keep by lying to children and terrifying them, and saying that because they could do that, they were morally superior to us. Reason, common sense, decency, ordinary decency rebels against this kind of mind-forged manacle. Is it good for the world to worship a deity that takes sides in wars and human affairs? To appeal to our fear and to our guilt, is it good for the world? To our terror of death, is it good to appeal? To preach guilt and shame about the sexual act and the sexual relationship, is this good for the world? And asking yourself the while, are these really religious responsibilities, as I maintain they are? To terrify children with the image of hell and eternal punishment, not just of themselves, but of their parents and those they love. Perhaps worst of all, to consider women an inferior creation. Is that good for the world? And can you name me a religion that has not done that? To insist that we are created and not evolved in the face of all the evidence. To say that certain books of legend and myth, man-made and primitive, are revealed, not man-made code. Religion forces nice people to do unkind things, and also makes intelligent people say stupid things. Handed a small baby for the first time, is it your first reaction to think, beautiful, almost perfect? Now please hand me the sharp stone for its genitalia, that I may do the work of the Lord. No. It is, as the great physicist Steven Weinberg has very aptly put it, in the ordinary moral universe, the good will do the best they can, the worst will do the worst they can. But if you want to make good people do wicked things, you'll need religion. Now, I've got now 1 minute and 57 seconds to say why I think this is very self-evident in our material world. Let me ask Tony again, because he's here, and because the place where he is seeking peace is the birthplace of monotheism. So you might think it was unusually filled with refulgence and love and peace. Everyone in the civilized world has roughly agreed, including the majority of Arabs and Jews and the international community, that there should be enough room for 2 states, for 2 peoples in the same land. I think we have a rough agreement on that. Why can't we get it? The UN can't get it, the US can't get it, the Quartet can't get it, the PLO can't get it, the Israeli Parliament can't get it. Why can't they get it? Because the parties of God have a veto on it, and everybody knows that this is true. Because of the divine promises made about this territory, there will never be peace, there will never be compromise. There will instead be misery, shame, and tyranny, and people will kill each other's children for ancient books and caves and relics. And who is going to say that this is good for the world? And that's just the example nearest to hand. Have you looked lately at the possibility that we used to discuss as children in fear? What will happen when messianic fanatics get hold of an apocalyptic weapon? Well, we're about to find that out as we watch the Islamic Republic of Iran and its party of God allies make a dress rehearsal for precisely this. Have you looked lately at the revival of Tsarism in Putin's Russia, where the black-cowled, black-coated leadership of Russian Orthodoxy is draped over an increasingly xenophobic, tyrannical, expansionist and aggressive regime? Have you looked lately at the teaching in Africa and the consequences of it, of a church that says AIDS may be wicked, but not as wicked as condoms? That's exactly no seconds left, ladies and gentlemen. I've done my best. Believe me, I have more.
The Crusades, the Inquisition, the persecution of the Jewish people, injustice towards women, that's half the human race right there, and the forced conversion of indigenous peoples, especially in South America, the African slave trade, the admission that Galileo was right, and for silence during Hitler's final solution, or Shoah. And it doesn't end there. There are smaller but significant, equally significant, avowals of a very bad conscience. These have included regret for the rape and the torture of orphans and other children in church-run schools in almost every country on earth, from Ireland to Australia. These are very serious matters, and they're not to be laughed off by references to the occasional work of Catholic charities. But I draw your attention not just to the apologies, ladies and gentlemen, but to the evasive and euphemistic form that they take. Joseph Ratzinger, the current Pope, considered by some, by Catholics, to be the Vicar of Christ on earth, in his comment, one of the few he's made, on the institutionalization of rape and torture and maltreatment of children in Catholic institutions, he has said, it's a very severe crisis which involves us, he said, in the following: in the need for applying to these victims the most loving pastoral care. Well, I'm sorry, they've already had that. And to say that this is the responsibility laid upon you by the horrific admission that you've already had to make is not accepting responsibility in any adult sense. The same euphemism comes in the term some Christians allow themselves to be deceived in this way and to act against the gospel. Well, anti-Semitism was preached as an official doctrine of the church until 1964. Do you think that might have something to do with public opinion in Austria and Bavaria and Poland and Lithuania? There will come a time when the church will issue apologies and explanations and half-baked appeals for forgiveness for things it's still doing. I think that there will be an apology for what happened in Rwanda, the most Catholic country in Africa, where priests and nuns and bishops are on trial for inciting from their pulpits and on the church's radio stations and newspapers the massacre of their brothers and sisters. Staying in Africa, I think it will one day be admitted with shame that it might have been in error to say that AIDS is bad as a disease, very bad, but not quite as bad as condoms are bad, or not as immoral in the same way.
We are the pure and chosen few, and all the rest are damned. There's room enough in hell for you. We don't want heaven crammed. In fact, in the work of many early church fathers, I'm so glad to find, by the way, that anything written in the first century by religious people doesn't count. And I wish that more ministers of religion would make that concession. You know, but Tertullian and many other Christian fathers thought that one of the pleasures of heaven, because it's always been rather hard to describe them, you ever noticed that? Eating foie gras to the sound of trumpets was the Reverend Sidney Smith's best shot. We know what the Muslims think for men.